Welcome to the Midwest Blitz. It's college football comfort food for the Midwest soul. Now, here are your hosts, Coach Drew and Big Nick.
Welcome to another edition of the Midwest Blitz. It's round 2 recap time. Yeah, yup.
My Indiana Hoosiers were victorious. We're going to cover all the college football playoff games. We're also going to cover Iowa and Illinois and some other Big Ten teams and some other bowl game stories. But we're going to lead off, Coach Drew, with the New Year's Eve Cotton Bowl. Miami beats Ohio State 24-14, Coach Drew. I did not pick Miami to win this game. I don't think you did either, but we did think it would be closer than the 9.5 to 10-point spread that was put in front of us. Miami dominated this game with old school smash mouth football, which we love here on the Midwest Blitz. And I want to say this about Miami. They had 2 questionable losses against SMU and Louisville on the road in ACC conference play, but at the end of the year, Coach Mario Cristobal committed unwaveringly to running the football and making life easier for Carson Beck and honestly making it more of a team game. Last year with the quarterback that they had, who was a high round draft pick, they just slung it around the yard. And Cristobal was like, hey, we're going to start making guys beat us. We're going to have a phone booth fist fight. And that's what Miami's been doing for the last few weeks. This is not the same Miami team that I watched at the beginning of the year, even the one that had the good win against Notre Dame. This team is built different in terms of strategy, and I think the players have really bought into it. You've gotten more production from some of the best players like Hakeem Mesidor and Ruben Bain. No one cared who I was till I put on the mask. Bain was a back-breaking force in this game. He didn't have a lot of tackles, but the QB pressures and pressure that led to an interception, pick 6 by Keontae Scott that we'll get to here in a second. So this unwavering commitment to running football and winning the lines of scrimmage is pretty much the opposite of what Ohio State is committed to. Ohio State was the best team in the country most of the year. I think that obviously Indiana beat them, but Indiana continued to improve at a rate that Ohio State did not. And I think that really showed in Ohio State's last 2 games. This defense led by Ruben Bain, Hakeem Mesidor, and Keontae Scott, and this offensive line led by Francis Maui Noah is relentless and physical at the line of scrimmage. They will not let you opt out of beating them at the line. They do live there, they win there, they'll die there if they die in this playoff, but they're going to be a tough out right now, way tougher than they would have been earlier in the year. And I want to talk about Hurricane defensive coordinator Corey Heatherman. He has this defense locked in a way that really looks less like a college team and more like some of the great NFL defenses that we've seen in the past. Baltimore Ravens that featured Ray Lewis and Ed Reed, great Miami Hurricane legends. That's what this team is playing like right now. They dared Ohio State to run the ball, Coach Drew, with a lot of quarter, half coverages, 6-man boxes. For those of you who don't speak football extensively, basically they're daring Ohio State to run the ball. They're inviting them to run the ball. And Ryan Day is the play caller in this game for the Buckeyes, declined that invitation for most of the first half. He tried to correct it in the second half, Coach Drew. Ohio State came out in some more heavy sets. They went back to their power back, C.J. Donaldson, who I think, okay, here's my take on Ohio State's running game throughout the year and their uses of running backs. And historically, what happens with the Buckeyes is that they have a back who's good between the tackles. The same thing with Master Teague a couple years ago, who I thought was going to be an All-American. Then they got Travion Henderson. Travion Henderson is an absolute dog, by the way. No hatred towards him in any way, shape, or form. But they stopped giving Master Teague the football a couple of years ago when Travion Henderson came in and broke off a few long touchdown runs. Well, Coach Drew, we know here on the Midwest Blitz that you're not going to blow everybody out and you're not going to boat race everybody. Sometimes you have to convert on a 3rd and 3, a 2nd and short, a goal line play. You don't need the fastest back on the field at that point. You don't need Rocket Ishmael, who was a wide receiver, but you don't need Rocket Ishmael. You need Emmitt Smith. You need somebody that knows how to wiggle their way in there, move their hips, and get you 2 or 3 yards when you need it. And Ohio State is not committed to those types of running backs for the last few years, in my opinion. Again, though, Heatherman and the Hurricane defense, I think they knew that. And so they dared Ohio State to run the football in the first half. In the second half, Ohio State tried to correct their error, but you can't come out down 14-0 and then begin a commitment to run the football. You just can't do it, Coach Drew. It doesn't work. That's not how it works. Coach Drew, you coach chess. You can't come out with an opening that doesn't control the middle of the board and then halfway through the match go, oh, I'm going to take over the middle of the board now. That's not how strategy works in any game, honestly, especially with equal talent. Do you have a response to that, buddy?
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
a film to watch. I don't know what they did between that week, right? But this is a recurring occurrence that happens in the college football playoffs. 1 out of 7 teams after this weekend have now advanced after a bye. One of those 7 teams also has not really been relevant in football. So it's kind of interesting to see like how do we these traditional teams that are really good getting these buys, what are they doing in their meantime? Like do they think they're the best team in the world because they have a bye? Should they play another bye team? I'm not saying they should, but I'm just saying that this is crazy. There is one team we'll get to later. Not going to steal away from this because I still want to talk about Miami. But that one team that did win has had a chip on his shoulder all year. And maybe it's just because, as Sig said, is it too big because we're Indiana? But back to Miami. One of the things I also want to say is Case Scott is not getting any Christmas presents from the Seon family, as Julian Seon's other brother also got a pick 6 in the state championship, I think they said. And then Julian Seon also got a pick 6 in the quarterfinals, or semifinals, I'm sorry. But it's one of those things where, I just want to point that out. Seon, Super Saiyan, he struggled as far as it seems like they didn't have the right response for him. Now, the offensive coordinator wasn't calling calls, and Ryan Day was. How is this going to play a factor? Could Ryan Day not only coach the team, but also call the plays, right?
Yeah.
That's a true thing. Ohio State started off slow. They never got moving. And when they started moving, it was the second half, and it was already too late. Because as we previously discussed, I called this last week, will Ohio State, when it gets tough, what will they do? Will they just shrivel up, or will they actually battle? And unfortunately, Ohio State was not battle ready for this game.
So I said that I thought it was going to be an advantage to have Ryan Day calling plays because he's done a great job of that in the past. And I think I was absolutely wrong about that. As we said, they didn't start really committing to trying to run the ball between the tackles until the second half. You're down 14-0. There was a couple other good points you made there, Coach Drew, that I wanted to touch on, which is they had extra film to study on Miami, and this was kind of a question mark that I pondered the night before the game, which is if you saw, and we talked about it here on the Midwest Blitz, if you saw the way Miami ran the football and wouldn't step off of it in a phone booth fight type of game against Texas A&M on the road, Ohio State should have realized what they were in for here. You cannot come out not running the ball against a team that runs it effectively and expect to win against equal talent. I think that Ohio State is the racehorse that blows people out when there's not competition, but Coach Drew likes horse racing, and I like to watch it at least in the spring and the summer. Some horses, when they get the lead, they take off and run away from you. Other horses, when they get challenged, they shy away from that challenge. And the way Ohio State's offensive line, running back room, and the strategy around those players is constructed is not for them to win these close games, these rock fights. The rock fight that they lost against Indiana, even though I, as an IU fan, think that Ohio State clearly had at least a little more talent at certain skill positions, but when they were challenged to execute play in and play out, they kind of shied away from it. I was honestly a little surprised, Coach Drew. I mean, I knew Miami could hang with them. Yeah, but the extra film, the extra time to prepare did not benefit Ohio State in any way, shape, or form. And I kind of put that on head coach Ryan Day. If you're going to take over as the play caller, then you need to be ready and realize that what did we say, Coach Drew? You cannot drop Sam back to throw the ball 30, 35, 40 times. It was in the in this game, his total passing. The other point you made, which was interesting about Sam throwing the pick 6 to Scott, and then I guess Scott's brother had done the same thing to him in high school. I honestly did not put this pick 6 Julian saying. So this was an RPO play where the read man, or which was the read man being the person you're going to leave unblocked, was Reuben Bain on the throw side. This guy's been in his face the whole game, and he's been a menace for the last month and a half of college football, and you're going to leave him unblocked and let him charge right at your freshman quarterback? That would be like letting a bull out of the pen to charge right at somebody while they're throwing a pitch. So his vision is obstructed. Bain's got a hand in the passing lane, and then you've got Keontae Scott, who's an all-time baller right now for Miami, there to run with it. I mean, I think it was bad play call. I like RPOs. I like fancy play calls, tricky play calls, but you have to realize, who are you leaving unguarded here? It's like if you're running a half-court trap in the NBA, the guy you leave open can't be LeBron James, and they just throw it at the rim and he slam dunks it on you. You know what I mean? You got to think Jimmys and Joes over X's and O's sometimes in these big game situations against elite competition. I think it was a bad play call. Yeah, Ohio State, the expectation for Buckeye fans is to win championships, Big Ten championships and national championships, and they've done a masterful job of that throughout my lifetime. They did lose a close one in the Big Ten championship game. They did lose a game last year to Michigan at the end of the year, and I'm not rubbing that in. But if your expectation is to win the national championship game, you cannot come in with an offensive line where you're scared to run the ball. You can't. You have to be able to run it between the tackles. The A and the B gap cannot be off limits, and we're going to touch on that again when we get to Alabama, Indiana, which was an absolute ass spanking. That wasn't as bad here for Ohio State against Miami. I think the strategy of Miami, while simplistic, was more effective in a big game scenario than what Ohio State came out with. And dude, Jeremiah Smith was a badass in this game. It's not his fault they lost. He had a great game. I don't know if he had 7 or 8 catches for $170 or something like that. I don't have the number in front of me. But you can't think you're just going to throw over the top against other talented teams. You can't think you're going to throw bubble screens and spot passes and win the game against a team like this. And the temperature rises, Coach Drew, when the other team's running the ball and you're not able to do it, and both teams have good defenses. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, again, going back to defenses do win championships. And Ohio State, I was going to make a joke. You said Ohio State had troubles running through the tackles. Well, they did have Bo Jackson the second running back there. I mean, to make a pundit of jokes. I mean, the thing is, with Ohio State, the way they played, a lot of their stuff, I mean, you touched on it, the way Carson Beck threw the ball when you were watching the film and the replays. We were talking about it.
Yeah.
He was moving the ball methodically. As previously discussed, and a lot of people were agreeing with me, this had a lot to do with the draft stock for Carson Beck. If I'm an NFL GM, I'm watching the way he managed this game, and I'm saying this guy can come in and potentially run an offense next year. Potentially. Now, there's a quarterback we're going to talk about later who I did not see the same thing, and he did get injured. Spoiler. And it has to do with the team that Nick's wearing. Also spoiler. But again, Carson Beck did a great job. I think this is going to bring him up his draft stock. Now, they will play against Ole Miss, which we're going to get to later. But I'm very intrigued. What is the ceiling for Carson Beck? Does he get back into that day one conversation again?
Okay, so Carson Beck, I think, did himself a big favor in this game. So Carson Beck's playing a role right now that younger football fans won't recognize. But if you go back to the early 2000s and into the 90s and 80s, Hall of Fame quarterback like Troy Aikman, if you look at his numbers now, kids ask, and I've had kids ask me this, well, how the hell is Troy Aikman a Hall of Famer if he only threw for X number of yards and X number of touchdowns? It's because on third down, Troy Aikman with a gun to his head would thread a needle over the middle. And that's what Carson Beck did a few times in this game. He was able to convert things that were tough passes over the middle. He was good in clutch time, and he had enough scrambling ability under pressure to either avoid negative plays or pick up a first down 1 or 2 times. And these are types of things that pro scouts want to see. They're not just interested in you, not to pick on Shadur Sanders too much, but there's a lot of highlights with Shadur and Travis Hunter last year, and I enjoyed watching them play at Colorado immensely. I had a Deion Sanders jersey when I was a kid, actually. But they don't just want to see these long throws against middling competition. They want to see what you do in a tough game against an elite defense, because this defense that Carson Beck saw yesterday is as close to an NFL defense as he's going to see all year, especially the way the Hurricanes are playing right now. I agree, Coach Drew. Beck, the question that you asked in our last show is like, what's he going to do? How's he going to present himself? And I think he did a fantastic job.
Yeah, you could definitely see why he was the coveted transfer portal target last year.
Yeah.
Which you could also see the advancement of a quarterback who's been through a couple systems, right? We talk about systems and development.
Played in big-time games. This
is arguably Julian Seon, I will say this, has played in 3 games back-to-back that have been really rough for him. He had to go to the big house, then he had to play in the Big Ten Championship, and then he had to play Miami. I mean, that right there, predominantly Michigan's been known as a defensive team this year because Bryce Underwood had some struggles with the offensive coordinator and being developed there. And then Indiana really showed they could play defense against anybody, and they did that against Ohio State in one of their biggest games. The thing that I'm really interested in to see in the offseason, the development of Julian Seon and how much more he can do. A lot of these quarterbacks, one of the things that I've realized watching a lot of just the quarterbacks is they sit back there and they don't digest anything.
Yeah.
They just say hike. Now, I'm not a quarterback. I didn't play in the NFL. But again, the quarterbacks who do well digest, they look at things, they break it down. If I call a run play and you break that huddle and it's a run play and you go in there and you look at the defense and you go, all right, yeah, we got him, hike, and then it doesn't work out. I feel like what adjustments could have, at least give something like fake. Like a lot of the misdirections and a lot of stuff that freezes, I've been watching a lot of Ben Johnson film lately.
Yeah.
And one of the things he likes to do is he moves the defense into a position or freezes them going one way, and he really gets a good misdirection going the other way. It's almost like you're running right and then you slip trying to tackle left is what he wants. It's very unique, and I'm interested to see between him and Bryce Underwood how much growth they're going to have throughout the season if Bryce Underwood chooses to stay at Michigan.
As that game went along, Coach Drew, Ohio State did get more creative in motions, which forced Miami to shift coverages. The deep ball, I think it was the longest pass that Jeremiah Smith caught. They motioned from an unbalanced formation to a balanced formation, which basically got them cover one. So they had a deep safety somewhere, and then Smith had one-on-one, and they froze the safety on the other side. They were trying to do those things. After I watched the All-22 film, I did get to see some of that. But you know what, Drew? It was too little too late. Early, they lined up in 3-by-1 formations, 11 personnel a lot of the time, but they weren't heavy sets. They had one tight end, one back, and they were afraid to run up the middle. It put Sayan in a really difficult position. I agree with you that Sayan could have played better, but I think that his coach could have done better by him by setting him up with a better running plan. I think that there's got to be questions about the offensive line coach, running back usage, and more power, less speed. C.J. Donaldson, the better power back that I mentioned earlier, he played more in the second half. He's also their better third down back, in my opinion. Lamar Bo Jackson, the other Bo Jackson, he's more of a slasher, he might gash you deep. But if he's got a small gap to wiggle through, he's not really your guy. I think that they have to rethink their use of running backs, but dude, congrats to the Miami Hurricanes. Buckeye fans, we know you love us, but I guess we'll see you next year. They got out-coached, Coach Drew. The Buckeyes got out-coached, and they got out-fought in the trenches. I was going to say one more thing. The team unity and the team spirit of the Miami Hurricanes, the way they interact as a team, the way they pick each other up when someone's down, the way they celebrate each other's successes kind of looks like my Indiana Hoosiers. This is a team that's really linked in with one another. It's fun to watch teams where the teammates really look like they care about each other and they're not just out there to get theirs. And I think Miami is a team like that. I mean, Mark Fletcher at running back is a warrior, and I think he's the emotional leader of that offense. And he keeps them up if they get they run the ball on first down and they only get a yard. Even if it's him or somebody else, he goes over to Carson Beck and he goes over to the offensive lineman. He's like, "It's all right, man. We'll get it next time." There's no negativity and no selfishness. Coach Drew, unless you have something else, I think we could move on to the Orange Bowl. You all right with that?
Yeah, we can move on to the Orange Bowl where we have Oregon playing Texas Tech. Now, one thing before I let you start talking, Nick. Now, I'm a huge believer in defense. Okay, defense wins national championships.
Oh, yeah.
What again, going to Miami played a great job defensively, and we knew Ohio State is a good defense. They just didn't play well against a veteran Carson Beck. But when I look at all the teams and defenses this weekend, I thought Texas Tech was one of the better defenses out there, right next to Miami, that had been talked about and hyped, right? I don't know how they got a goose egg. I just want to say that. I feel like if you play your little brother and you beat up your little brother all the time, then someone says you're a welterweight champion. I feel like that might have been what Texas Tech had happened when they beat BYU twice. Because again, when we were doing the comparison of who they beat, it was BYU twice and Utah. It wasn't like they beat anybody that we would consider SEC approved or our Big Ten approved. So it's very interesting to see that I feel
I'm gonna lean into that. Thank you, Coach Shu. That was an awesome start to this. On New Year's Day at the Orange Bowl, the Oregon Ducks won 23-0 against the Texas Tech Red Raiders. And Coach Drew just made a comparison between the Big 12 champion being like a middleweight in boxing that just moved up to heavyweight and found out what it's like to fight a heavyweight. I will say this about the Texas Tech defense. I think that both defenses in this game were phenomenal. I think that my theory all year that the front seven for Texas Tech was legit was proven correct. The Ducks struggled to run the ball. They struggled to move the ball at points in this game. Before I brag about how great these defenses were, I want to point out that Dante Moore at 26 of 33 for 230 yards and an interception doesn't sound like a gaudy stat line, but the Ducks struggled to run the ball actually more than the Red Raiders did. But Baron Morton at 18 of 32 for $137 and 2 interceptions, especially the one in the end zone, which was absolutely horrible to Brandon Finney. Brandon Finney's a player of the game here, Coach Drew. 2 interceptions and a fumble recovery. Of course, the fumble recovery was by our favorite Houston Astro draft pick, Bryce Betcher, the Eugene, Oregon native. He's a Duck hero for life. He's never buying a beer in Eugene, Oregon again if he doesn't want to. Dylan Thieneman, Bryce Betcher, and Tuiyote with 2 sacks on defense slammed the door on this argument that we heard earlier in the year. Remember Coach Drew and some fans tried to tell us that Oregon was a finesse football team? There is no way anybody that watched this game thinks that they're finesse. Thieneman, Betcher, and Tuiyote, and Finney, dude. Finney had a hand in 3 turnovers. This Oregon defense is battle-tested. I thought that secondaries would be tested in this game because I knew that running the ball might be hard for each team. The Big Ten secondary of the Oregon Ducks held up a lot better than the Texas Tech Red Raiders did. Maybe it was, I don't know. I was about to make an excuse for Baron Morton and his 18 of 32, but Baron Morton was not prepared for pressure burst pipes type of football game that we kind of talked about going into this second round playoff matchup. Yards were hard to come by in this game. And Dante Moore had more composure and more ability to deliver the football when needed to put his team in scoring position. Davison, the freshman running back, who's a load at 236 pounds, was good for them. The couple times he did get a chance to go down there and get close into scoring position, he punched a couple in for the Ducks. Moreover, Morton is a storyline in this game, but more than that, I think that Oregon's defense was better than Texas Tech's, even though Texas Tech's defense was pretty great. But Oregon found the holes in the secondary of the Red Raiders. Dan Lanning found a way to win a game. These games, Coach Drew, it's like you coach baseball. Winning a game 3-2 is a lot harder than winning a game 10-6 when you're just waiting for the other team's starter to get knocked out of the game, and then you know your boys are going to start teeing off on the baseball. And Dan Lanning has showed why he's one of the best coaches in the country against a super legit front seven led by Jacob Rodriguez, who everybody loves. We love the stashes on that Red Raider defense. We love Rodriguez. His story is very fun. His wife's in the military. She flies Black Hawk helicopters. That's a fun family family. Their kids are going to be super badass. But as great as Texas Tech defense is and all the oil money and all the NIL money that was pumped into the program this year, their offense was non-existent against a big league defense like Oregon. Coach McGuire for the Red Raiders is going to have to go back to the drawing board on offense. And honestly, Baron Morton had looked good at times this year. He was a dark horse Heisman mention earlier in the year, and we saw that panned out. Oregon is going to need the physicality that they brought here when they play the Hoosiers in the next round. But Oregon is one of the most physical teams in the country, and we've said that all year on the Midwest Blitz, right, Coach Drew? We knew Oregon could do it up front, and they really proved it in this game.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, seeing them do that, it was very intriguing, like I said earlier, about the Texas Tech situation. I thought that they were going to give Oregon a better fight, but again, it just did not. Was the lights too big? I mean, the Big 12 did everything in their power to get a conference champion in here, and they did have representation. I do genuinely feel bad for them because your champion, the person that you put out there, I mean, we look at Arizona State last year and how well they did and how they lost on a controversial call to Texas in the same situation. I mean, that's where Scadaboo was teaching us that he's a psycho. I mean, now,
the legend of Cam Scadaboo was born.
Yeah, against that Texas defense.
Yep.
But now this Texas Tech team, it's going to be interesting to see what they do during the offseason. It's going to be interesting to see how they retool. It's going to be interesting how every time they get brought up next year, someone's going to remind us that they couldn't score a field goal against Oregon. Another thing I do want to say, though, is Oregon played super ultra aggressive.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know if that plays a factor. That defense might be used to being out there for 4 plays. And I mean, if they have anybody on the punt coverage. But Oregon was like, yeah, 4th down. What do you mean? That's just a 4th opportunity to go. And if we don't make it, well, we're out of luck. But, I mean, they did keep that. It was a very interesting coach. I was surprised by how aggressive Dan Lanning was.
Dude, Oregon's been through some battles this year. The early season overtime win over Penn State with 110-some thousand fans watching. They lost one to Indiana. Oregon caught a lot of grief over that because all the Indiana deniers were still saying anybody Indiana beat was overrated, which we know here on the Midwest Blitz was total fucking horse shit. So Oregon's been through some tests. Oregon had to go to Iowa and win, which is harder than outside of Big Ten fans. You don't realize how tough Iowa is defensively. We're going to talk about the Hawkeyes later, by the way, and how they smacked Diego Pavi in the mouth. But Oregon's been through some battles, man. They've been into deep water. They've been into those championship rounds against some hard-hitting teams. I think it showed in this game. Maybe if they played a few more times, we like to play what if these teams played 10 times? I'm not saying Texas Tech would beat them if they played again, but I think that Texas Tech was just not battle tested enough because they had abused BYU at the line of scrimmage a couple times this year, and that was the best opponent they played. BYU was a good team that maximized their talent, but they didn't have the physicality of the Oregon Ducks, the Indiana Hoosiers, the Ohio State Buckeyes, even the Penn State Nittany Lions, Iowa Hawkeyes. Like, the level of physicality that this Oregon team has seen, not just this year, but over the last couple of years, is just on a different level than Texas Tech. So I like your middleweight moving up to heavyweight analogy there, Coach Drew.
Thank you. Well, I think there's not as much as we can talk about this game. I think we've said it all. Now we should head over to the grand of them all, the Rose Bowl.
The number
where
one.
Indiana has done something that's been unprecedented. And some might say it might be too big, as I'm blue something Nick over here. Go ahead, Nick.
The granddaddy of them all, the Rose Bowl. Indiana takes down Alabama 38-3, an absolute beatdown. Let me read you some quotes about this game, Coach Drew. Kirk Herbstreit said, "They got outclassed. Not a team who deserves to be on the field." Let's see. Nick Saban said, "This is not a team that should have been on the field when you consider the other teams that could have been there." A little Easter egg for you there, Coach Drew. And Paul Feinbaum said, "They were just a fraud. This team is a fluke. The contract they gave this coach is a terrible move." Now, those are media quotes from famous college football pundits, Coach Drew, but these are not quotes that should have been levied against Alabama and should have been levied against them heavily after this game. This is all the bullshit they talked about my Hoosiers last year, Coach Drew. So when Alabama gets beat by 35, nobody's going to talk about how they could have put Notre Dame in ahead of them. Nobody's going to talk about how they could have put BYU in ahead of them or any other number of teams, because you know what? We powder Alabama's ass and treat them like they're special and their butt doesn't stink like all the other babies. Alabama got their ass kicked by the more talented team, the better coach team, the more physical team. The Crimson Tide were humiliated by an overall better team. And Coach Drew, as we said on the pre-show or the preview of this game, and as I will say again, Alabama doesn't have more legitimate football talent than the Indiana Hoosiers. They might win the track meet. They might win the measurable, how tall you are, how much you weigh, and all this crap. But when it's between the lines, this Alabama team is soft. This team is soft up front. It's a great day to be a Hoosier right now. If you guys haven't caught on to that yet, I mean, winning the Rose Bowl was a dream that I've had my whole life that my dad told me. He told me, son, one day we will go back to the Rose Bowl. Indiana had never even won the Rose Bowl. We'd only been there one time. So if you're an IU fan, you understand what I'm saying, how meaningful it is for us to win. We had an interaction with an Alabama fan before this game. I said, Hoosier fans will travel very well to this game. And of course, the butthurt, sensitive Alabama fan said, Alabama travels well too. We got fans all over the country. Yeah, I heard it was between 60 and 80% IU fans there. And I didn't say Alabama wouldn't travel, but they say in the SEC, Coach Drew, it just means more. Well, in the Rose Bowl, it just means more to a Big Ten team because traditionally that's where our teams have went. And for a team like Indiana that hasn't been in forever, this really did mean more to the fan base, at least. I'm not saying that impacted the 18 to 23-year-old players. I'm sure most of them don't care a whole lot about all that nonsense, but I want to point this out. Caleb DeBoer was coaching scared. This fourth down attempt he had, down 3-0 in the second quarter, was him trying to steal momentum away from the Hoosiers. If you go back and watch the film, Alabama did not have confidence against heavy sets that they could stop the run without loading the box. They didn't have confidence that they could pressure Fernando Mendoza without blitzing. So that first drive, they sacked him twice. Well, they went 0-man blitz and sent 7 2 different times. Indiana didn't have that on their bingo card yet. And once they did, Alabama pulled the same move later. That's when Fernando Mendoza throws the dart to Charlie Becker for the touchdown pass. Somebody said Fernando Mendoza didn't have a strong arm, Coach Drew. You watch this guy throw off his back foot. He's throwing lasers. DeBoer knew that they were outmatched. He was afraid to run the ball. And I mean, I guess I can't blame him because I watched enough Alabama film to tell you that I knew that they wouldn't be able to run the ball and it was going to put Ty Simpson under a lot of pressure. And that's no shade at Ty Simpson, but the most iconic moment in this game as an Indiana fan is the moment that 5'9" D'Angelo Pons breaks Ty Simpson in half and cracks one of his ribs. I'm not happy that he got injured, Coach Drew, that this was like Mighty Mouse. If you guys remember the old school Mighty Mouse cartoon, Mighty Mouse was a mouse that had powers like Superman. D'Angelo Pons was Mighty Mouse manhandling an elephant in this situation, the elephant being the Alabama Crimson Tide, and Mr. Pons, Rose Bowl defensive MVP, being Mighty Mouse in this situation. It was the ultimate. I've heard all year, oh, D'Angelo Pons is too small. And then he did a great job on Jeremiah Smith in the Big Ten championship game. Then in this game, he's out there cracking heads. Oh, Indiana's not big enough. They're not fast enough. They don't have enough talent. Where the hell was the talent on Alabama's side of the football, Coach Drew? I want somebody in the comment section to tell me one position group where Alabama had more talent in this game. Ryan Williams is the paper tiger. I heard somebody say, oh, I think Indiana's a paper tiger. Yeah, go watch the film, go watch the highlights, go look at the box score. Who's the paper tiger in this game? The Alabama Crimson Tide, who were allowed into this tournament with 3 losses. And look, I respect the fact that you lost in the SEC championship game. I don't respect the fact that you got bitch slapped by Georgia, who just got beat by Ole Miss, who has a very questionable defense. Although I'm excited about Ole Miss and their story. I'm not hating on the Rebs right now. Alabama's the paper tiger in this scenario. They're the fraud. Who's fraudulent here, Coach Drew? And I'll pass it over to you after this. D'Angelo Pons and Pat Coogan winning defensive and offensive MVP, respectively. Pat Coogan, the center transfer from Notre Dame, who they didn't even want on their team after he led them on the offensive line. He was the leader of that offensive line on their way to the national championship game. The fact that Pons, a guy who had like 1 or 2 D1 scholarship offers when he went to James Madison, and Pat Coogan, a guy who Notre Dame didn't even want to keep around being the MVPs, is the perfect conclusion to a dream performance in Pasadena for Indiana. 2 guys that the other teams didn't want, and we just beat the shit out of Alabama with them as the leaders of our team. I love D'Angelo Pons. I love Pat Coogan. I love Isaiah Bones-Jones. I love Hayden Fisher. There's so many players on this team, Coach Drew. One more thing is that Alabama, with their vaunted passing attack and 0 running game, was terrified to throw the ball over the middle because they knew Indiana would pluck it out of the air. They got outclassed, outmatched, and got their ass beat. Coach Drew, let me know what you think about that.
Well, the band of misfit toys, quoted by Pat McAfee, gets the job done in the Rose Bowl. One of the things that I thought was a weak statement that DeBoer said was, well, Indiana scored on short yardage. Excuse me? That's like for a baseball perspective, yeah, my pitcher threw a couple balls over the middle and they just hit home runs. Like, yeah, no shit. Like,
we walked
you're
the
getting your
bases
ass
loaded.
beat.
We walked
Yeah.
the bases loaded, and you hit a single and drove in 2 runs. It's luck.
Yeah, it's all luck. I mean, I love how everybody was doubting Indiana up to this game. I'm glad Indiana won the way they did because, again, the Alabama bias... Hoosiers. The Alabama biases was insane. Being a Notre Dame fan and understanding what you went through this week is similar to when we went to the BCS championship against Alabama, except the unfortunate thing was Notre Dame got spanked, so it lived on, and I'm glad that you didn't have to deal with that. I'm glad you're actually on the other side of history, where now we could talk about DeBoer being debroke.
Coach debunked. I got a good SEC fan quote for you. We're gonna punk the Georgia fans since they're not listening anyway, since they got knocked out. This social media post from a Georgia fan before the game. Georgia fan here, coming in peace. Am I crazy, or is the Rose Bowl spread a total joke? Indiana was favored by a touchdown. I've never bet on sports, but I'm seriously about to drop a bag on Alabama on Robinhood. I need someone to tell me if I'm crazy. I know IU is like 13-0, won the Big Ten championship, and has the Heisman Trophy winner, but the eye test says they're about to get their ass beat. The eye test? You're a 3-loss team playing the best team in the country. SEC athletes versus a system team. Feels like stealing. Am I missing something? Or is Indiana a paper tiger? This dumb bastard. Holy cow.
I'm pretty sure I also saw a similar one. That was hilarious. They just can't. Excuse me, the paper tiger reference is funny because I've never seen a team that has a Heisman winner, won a championship,
one of the best defenses
undefeated,
in the country, one of the best offensitive lines,
has been as disrespected as Indiana has. They beat Oregon, who just beat Texas Tech 23-0. You know, Miami.
No, Coach Drew.
Now, they did beat Ohio State, but...
Here's a statistic, Coach Drew, that we haven't brought up yet. This Indiana team, man for man, down to the ball boys and the student managers, has to carry their ball sack into the stadium in a wheelbarrow because their nads are so big. Some of these SEC teams, they have talent. They don't fight you in the trenches. Alabama is soft up the middle. And Ty Simpson, I'm sorry, got his rib broke. Ty Simpson had no chance of doing any kind of magician work, pulling a rabbit out of his hat against this Indiana defense when you can't run the ball, you can't pass protect, and your wide receivers are, well, who's your best wide receiver? All right, Bernard is actually their best wide receiver. But the most hyped wide receiver, in respect to Bernard, he's a badass. The most hyped wide receiver is Ryan Williams. Dude, Ryan Williams is softer than tissue paper. D'Angelo Pons or Elijah Surratt or Omar Cooper or Charlie Becker would stuff him in a fucking locker if he came to two-a-days in Indiana. He ain't out there to hit and play ball. He's just not. He's just not. And let's go to the fourth down call by DeBoer, Coach Drew, where he acts like he's going to run it. I thought they were trying to get Indiana to jump off sides, which is a waste of a timeout, but whatever, you tried to do it. What did they do, Coach Drew, on 4th and short when they tried it? Did they run it up the middle? No. They ran a jet sweep to Jeremy Bernard. It's not Bernard's fault that they did this. I like Jeremy Bernard. He's a tough player. He's a good kid. You calling a timeout to go for it on 4th and short and running a fucking jet sweep is the most pussy play call you could ever have. That told everyone on your team you had no faith in your offensive line, you had no faith in your running backs, and that you were scared shitless of Indiana's defense. It's pathetic. It's pathetic. What did Paul Feinbaum say about Cignetti's contract extension? This was a terrible move. I like DeBoer. I do think he's a good coach. I know that no Alabama fan is going to like me, and DeBoer would not like me if you heard what I just said. He is a good coach, but he's not the best coach in the country. And this Feinbaum's "it's a terrible move" about signing Cignetti is one of the dumbest fucking things I have ever seen said on camera about sports. Paul Feinbaum is an absolute fraud of a human being. If you are an Alabama fan and you somehow suffered through this, please stop watching this dumbass. He doesn't know shit. He lies to you. He's like the drug dealer that wants to sell you another hit so you'll come back to him again. He knows nothing about football. He's not an unbiased analyst. He's a total dirtbag, loser.
Another thing I did want to mention that the announcers, I think Herb Herstreak said it, he kept announcing that Indiana made Alabama look normal, which I thought was hilarious. What he was referring to was
he talking about Florida State? Was he talking about Florida State or was he talking about Indiana? Sorry, Drew, I didn't mean to interrupt you. My bad.
Yeah, it's bad, like, because Alabama carries this mystique, but they just look like another team. And I loved that at the beginning of the tournament, the college football playoffs, everybody looked at the stars and said, Indiana doesn't deserve to be here.
Indiana's overrated. Ohio State's overrated. So-and-so's overrated. Turn the tape on. Stop watching ESPN for all your sports opinions. Look, I want to say this, Coach Drew, and then maybe I'm ready to move on. We are going to come back to this in the Midwest Goodbye. America, please clip this, Drew. America, please. Anybody who told you that they thought Alabama was going to win this game either doesn't know football or they're lying to you. They are lying to you. Nick Saban lied to you. Desmond Howard lied to you. Anybody that knows ball that picked Alabama lied to you. You need to find other people to get your sports information from. You should go to the Rate Game app. There's a lot of great sports conversations going on there that don't have any bias or any lies involved. It was obvious from Jump Street, if you watch film and you know ball, that Indiana was going to kick the shit out of Alabama. You can go back and watch our old videos. We told you here. I'm not just saying it because I'm an IU fan. I'm saying it because Alabama is soft. They are so soft. So soft. You can't rest on your laurels and your victories of the past and then have supposed football experts that thought you were going to win this game against the most well-rounded, best coached team in America. Get out of here.
It is true. Are you ready to go to Ole Miss and Georgia? We could always come back to this.
Do we have to stop talking about Indiana, Coach Drew? I'm so happy right now.
Well, I mean, unfortunately, you guys did so good. There's not a lot to talk about.
I know. I mean, the Indiana game was actually like the worst game of the weekend in terms of competitiveness. But for me, it was like a lifetime in waiting. So, boy, we will come back to it later. What bowl, you might timestamp this, what bowl was Ole Miss in Georgia? I forgot to write it down. I'm sorry.
It was the Caesars Superdome.
So it was
All-State.
Sugar Bowl.
All-State Sugar Bowl.
You ready? So, Coach Drew, in the Sugar Bowl, the Ole Miss Rebels had another shootout with the Georgia Bulldogs. This one was it a rematch or a rerun? I thought it was a rerun for a minute until the outcome was different. The Rebels take down Georgia 39-34. I thought, Coach Drew, and we talked about this, I thought Georgia's defense had improved and would slow down the Ole Miss offense, the high-flying Rebel offense, a little more than they did. Trinidad Chambliss, number one, is amazing. He made several plays in a row in this football game where you're just like, who is this guy? He's got the cape on. Number two, Kirby Smarts. bad decision to go for it on fourth down cost them the game. It led to points for Ole Miss, totally shifted momentum, gave Ole Miss the lead. Chambliss and Lacey are a dynamic duo for the Rebels that would be hard for almost any defense to deal with. Chambliss 30 of 46 for 360 and 2 tuds. Keywan Lacey, I like that name, Keywan, from the St. Lunatics. You remember that, Coach Drew, back in the day, the rapper?
Yeah, I do.
Keywan Lacey, 22 carries for 98 yards and 2 touchdowns. They are the, fix-it repairmen and creators for this Ole Miss offense that has been really fun to watch all season. And what a story for the Rebels. Your coach leaves. I don't even want to say his name. Your coach abandons you, and the media dismisses your team. The media tells you, as I wear my IU shirt, Ole Miss fans, they tell you that your team doesn't matter, that your coach should just leave at the first sunshine, greener grass opportunity. And here you are knocking on the door of a national championship game. So I could not be more happy for the Ole Miss Rebels. If my Hoosiers weren't still in it, I might go all in on Ole Miss. I do think there's a lot of great stories in this college football playoff, but really happy for the Rebs here. Nothing against the Bulldogs. I think that Kirby really made a mistake there, and we were watching Scott Van Pelt on SportsCenter after the game, Coach Drew, and he had Kirby on for an interview and never asked him about the fourth down attempt that they failed. And that's why I don't watch ESPN very often, is that you're like, how do you not ask the coach that you screwed the game up with a failed fourth down attempt? To me, that's the most obvious question to ask. But when you have bias like you do at SEC ESPN, they don't want to hurt anybody's feelings. And I like Kirby Smart. I said on this show a few weeks ago that I think Kirby Smart has the best resume and is maybe the best coach in the country right now. So I'm not anti-Kirby Smart by any stretch, but why don't we ask questions that make sense? That's all I'm getting at here. Can the Rebs survive another game against a tough Miami team? That's kind of where my mind goes with this, Coach Drew, because, all right, fairy tale over for this conversation for the moment, although I am rooting for the Rebs. Ole Miss is clearly the least physical football team left in this tournament. And they've got to face the Miami Hurricanes. Indiana's physical. Oregon's physical. But Miami's whole calling card for the last month has been physicality. So this is going to be an absolute contrast of styles and strategies and game plans, which sometimes make the most fun games to watch. I just don't think that Chambliss, as great as he is, and Trinidad Chambliss is truly great, Coach Drew, I don't know how he's going to be able to drop back 40 times against Miami with Bain and Mesidor breathing down his neck and Keontae Scott roaming the secondary without having some turnovers forced. And also, I want to mention Bryce Fitzgerald, who had 2 interceptions against Texas A&M for the Hurricanes a couple games ago, and had 6 interceptions, which was tied for leaders amongst the Power 4 teams. Fitzgerald is going to be a major factor in this game, this next game for Ole Miss, because you just can't sling it around the yard against the Miami defense with the pass rush that they bring at you. Coach Drew, what do you think?
Well, I do want to say that I was surprised how this game played out. I really thought Georgia was going to do something bigger than what they've done in the past and stop Ole Miss, but that unfortunately wasn't the case. Ole Miss is playing with this underdog mentality, and I love it. Now, at first it was a Cinderella story because their head coach abandoned them. They know there's a lot of shakeup, but they did what they needed to do. Now 2 rounds in a row. They started with Tulane, and now they got Georgia. Now they are playing a really stout Miami team.
Defense, yeah.
And this Miami defense is tough. Now, again, this is going to be interesting. This is going to be interesting to bring up in our postseason when we look over quarterbacks and we're just comparing them.
Right.
We do have Chambliss and Beck. Beck is playing for an NFL top 10 pick.
Their offenses they run could not be more opposite, right, Coach Drew? I mean, it's apples and oranges.
And Chambliss from Ferris State, who from Grand Rapids, Michigan, was a quarterback that nobody really knew about. And this man went from nobody to starting quarterback after they had an injury to now somebody that we're talking about in the NFL draft upcoming year. Like, what a crazy turnaround of a career.
If
Like,
there's
talk about seizing the moment of an opportunity.
There couldn't be a better example for a kid who's still out there hanging around playing minor league baseball or playing Division II football or whatever. A better example of somebody who defies the odds. And I did not get to see Coach Drew, the quarterback that was supposed to start ahead of Trinidad Chambliss at the start of the year. He was injured before I got a chance to watch the Rebels. How good must have that guy been in practice? That he was ahead of Chambliss. I mean, dude, Chambliss is dropping dimes, escaping pressure. I mean, just Trinidad Chambliss could not have looked more like a legend in this game the other night. And we don't always flaunt the quarterbacks and dote on them here on the Midwest Blitz. We like the linemen, the linebackers, running backs, other positions, but holy crap. I mean, Trinidad Chambliss was absolute magic against the Georgia Bulldogs. There's no doubt. And he's definitely going to play some pro football. I guess he's lobbying for another year of eligibility. He's got a lawyer similar to what Louis Moore did at Indiana this year, who made All-American and almost had an interception against Alabama. But I don't know. I don't even know if Chambliss has to come back another year. He could go pro. I mean, dude, there's no way dude, he throws a tight ball, a pretty spiral. I mean, he throws a hell of a ball, dude. He can throw it on the run. I guess he's a little undersized by pro standards, but man, what a talent and what a story in the perseverance and the self-belief of Trinidad Chambliss to come from D2 to D1 and just tear shit up, man. He's a dog. Chambliss is. Easygoing kid, smiles a lot, seems to have no ego, good teammate, all this stuff. Fun story about how his parents named him Trinidad because they wanted to name a daughter Trinity, and then they saw the boxer Felix Trinidad, who I loved when I was a kid, and then they're like, Trinidad, pretty close. We like this name. Like, the whole story is pretty cool, Coach Drew. We're just full of good storylines here in the college football playoff right now. And this playoff expansion has been an absolute success. I know that the talking heads at the networks always tell you, oh, this problem with the playoff format and this problem with the playoff format. Drew, is this playoff format not leaps and bounds better than anything we had before?
Well, the only problem with the playoff format is the people talking about the playoff format.
Yeah.
I feel like the people that are driving the attention to it, and then sometimes even the committees, we thought the AP, who was controlled by the SEC, could not see through. When the committee came out and was telling us about these SEC schools, we're like, oh, okay, we'll add them in there. You're telling me Notre Dame couldn't have put up more points this weekend than Alabama or Texas Tech? Texas Tech did win a conference. I'm not going to say that about Texas Tech because they qualified the correct way that I would want to see them in this tournament format. But Alabama, who we cannot move, even though they got blown out by Georgia. We can't do it.
Can't move them.
It can't happen.
They got humiliated by Georgia, not as bad as they did by Indiana, but can you really, dude, okay. They had beat Georgia earlier in the year, right, Coach Drew?
Which was a fluke.
Absolutely. How can you, anyone in the audience, any football fan, explain to me how Alabama is a legit top tier team right now? They're a good football. They have
their name's
talent.
Alabama.
Because their name's Alabama. This is like, every year, even I'll pick on my Hoosiers, there's always somebody that always wants to rank Indiana basketball in the preseason when they have some talent, even though we haven't proven it in a while as a basketball team at Indiana because we're a blue blood name, an old school name. And that's what Alabama is right now. Alabama had some glaring holes in their team on the offensive line, running back, just overhyped. Stop listening to ESPN give you all your sports news. They're salesmen. They're selling you things. They're selling you teams. They're selling you ideas. They're selling you the Dallas Cowboys being a Super Bowl contender every year. I was raised a Cowboy fan. I grew up, my first Super Bowls were Emmitt Smith, Michael Irvin, and Troy Aikman. I am not a Cowboy hater. They overplay this Cowboys of the Super Bowl shit every year, just like they're going to overplay Alabama football. If you're watching this right now, just remember that. ESPN is not telling you the truth. They're supporting Alabama. They're supporting SEC teams because they have a contract with them. It helps them make money. They have Monday Night Football. They they air the Cowboys on Monday Night Football all the time because the Cowboys are a national brand, but also because it's symbiotic, Coach Drew. They sell you certain teams because it helps them financially. It's not because they're being honest with you. It's certainly not because they're watching as much game film and looking at as many stats as guys like me and you are, or other, independent journalists that cover football. I mean, Alabama was a joke in this game against Indiana. And they will never talk all the shit they did about Alabama like they did against Indiana last year against Notre Dame. Indiana did get beat down by Notre Dame, but at least they hung around and tried to make a comeback and never quit fighting. The fight was all whipped out of Alabama by the end of the third quarter in this game. Like, they're not on the same level as Indiana. They're not on the same level as Ohio State either. I know Ohio State got beat. Ohio State was way more competitive down the stretch against Miami than Alabama was against Indiana. Alabama's just a pampered, Alabama is the fat cow that's ready for slaughter when they play a tough team, a disciplined team, a well-coached team. Here's a story I was going to tell Coach Drew, is that I saw IU and Alabama getting off the bus, okay, the morning of the game. And you see Fernando Mendoza and the Indiana players, and they all have on matching white tracksuits, stuff that athletes wear, and it's got the Rose Bowl, it's got roses on it, it's got IU stuff on it. And then Alabama looks like a rock band that's coming off a 3-day bender. One guy's got a 3-piece suit, the other guy's got a sweatsuit, the other guy's got a Snuggie. They look like they just rolled out of bed. Indiana's guys are showing up like professionals, and Alabama's guys just look like college kids that just rolled out of bed. SEC, it just means more? I don't think so. Look at the way your team shows up to the game. If it meant more, you get out of bed, have a cup of coffee, and eat some eggs or oatmeal and show up like you're ready to play a football game and not show up like you just went to a frat party the night before. Alabama's performance in this game was absolutely humiliating if you're a proud fan of that program, and I know there are a lot of them, and there should be because they've had a great program. That Alabama team, the way it's run and the lack of discipline is laughable. That they try and sell them ahead of Notre Dame, that they try and sell them ahead of Indiana, that they try and sell them ahead of Ohio State, or even Texas Tech. Texas Tech did get worked over a little bit by Oregon, but their defense competed. You know what I mean? Alabama really didn't compete beyond the first quarter in this game at all. How much are these kids getting paid, Coach Drew? Who do you think has a higher payroll, Indiana or Alabama? Who do you think's getting paid more?
Alabama.
Who do you think's getting paid more NIL money? Omar Cooper, Elijah Surratt, or Ryan Williams? Ryan Williams is a waste of money. I'd cut his ass and let him hit the portal. Let somebody else pay him to do nothing. He did catch some balls in the fourth quarter. He was an absolute non-impact in this game. He caught the one slant route at the beginning of the games. D'Angelo Pons laid him out. He somehow managed not to drop it. Then he jumped up and started crowing and hitting his chest. They haven't been throwing you the ball for a month, dude, because you're soft and you fucking can't catch it and you drop it and you're out there talking shit. But you know what? I don't know. Some NFL guy might end up drafting him. I know he's only, a sophomore. I know he's only 18 years old. I probably shouldn't bust his ass as hard as I am, but they try and pump a guy like Williams up. Dude, Williams is not as good as Surratt. He's not as good as Cooper. He's not as good as Charlie Becker from Nashville, Tennessee. He really is. That's the paper tiger. I know I've said that over and over again, but there's not.
And that's going to recap it as we're going to head to the Midwest goodbye. Nick, we did have some bowl games, didn't we?
You know we love bowl games here on the Midwest Blitz, and we love the Illinois Fighting Illini, led by Coach Brett Bielema, my favorite buffet buster. I'd love to go to an all-you-can-eat buffet with Brett Bielema. He's the only guy that could probably eat more than me. Coach Drew knows it's true. It was fun, Coach Drew, to see them take down an SEC team in Tennessee, but it was more fun to see Luke Altmaier close it out for the Illini. It was really fun to see him play one last time. And that's one of the things here on the Midwest Blitz is we're going to go to Iowa, Michigan, and USC and Army and Navy here in a second, is that when we do this show, it's so fun for me as a former coach and somebody who just loves football to follow these teams as closely as we do, because it almost gives you a little tear in your eye, Coach Drew. I remember when I was a kid, the first 4-year class of players at IU that I remembered watching, and we had a kid that was an All-American that was a senior on the basketball team named A.J. Guyton. And A.J. Guyton was playing his last game. It was his last game at Assembly Hall. It was senior night, and I was like 10 or 12 years old. And I'm like, oh my God, Dad, we never get to see A.J. Guyton again. And he's like, no, son, he's graduating. that's kind of how I feel about a lot of these players now, Altmaier included. So good to see the Illini pull one out against Tennessee. What do you think about that,
Yeah,
Coach Drew?
that was a game winner on a walk-off field goal. A lot of people had Tennessee whooping Illinois. You know what? Another thing, too, it's kind of crazy. Illinois fades with another back-to-back 9-win season and back-to-back bowl games, which has never been done in Illini history. But again, nobody would know that because Indiana, their state line counterpart, is undefeated, has a Heisman winner, and is playing in the quarterfinals. But I did want to remind everybody that Illinois does have a good football program. Yes,
Oh,
they did
yeah.
get their ass beat by Indiana earlier this season.
I wasn't
But
going to
you
say
know,
anything. If we had
sometimes
a normal
it
Indiana
happens.
team, a normal middle to low level Indiana team, and Illinois doesn't take that tough loss earlier in the year, I'll just call it a tough loss, Coach Drew. We know what happened. Then Illinois would have been ranked way longer. They would have been in the CFP conversation. The Illini had a terrific team this year, and I like what they're doing with Bielema. That's another coach, another team that I've kind of adopted. I'm not going to root for them when they play Indiana, but I definitely rooted for them against the Vols. My mom's from Tennessee. She'd be very offended if she heard me say that, but I did.
It happens.
Oh, you know what Tennessee had to encounter in this game, Coach Drew, that they didn't see very often in the SEC? A team that plays defense. See, in the Southeastern Conference, where it just means more, some of these defenses are pretty shaky. They rely more on athleticism than they do coaching and execution, and I thought that was evident in this game. Although Tennessee held their own, I like Joey Aguilar. I like Tennessee's coach, too. He brings his mom to the game. It's pretty cool. I'm not anti-Vol by any stretch. I have Tennessee gear in my closet, but yeah, the hard-nosed defense that the Big Ten has to offer created problems for some other SEC teams, like the Vanderbilt Commodores.
Yeah, that's another Tennessee team that took it out. They had to score more than 7, and they couldn't.
Well, Diego Pavia said all you have to do to beat Iowa is score more than 7 points. They scored 27 and still lost by a touchdown. Also, no opt-outs for the Hawkeyes during this bowl game. Only one for Vanderbilt, which was respectable. Their All-American tight end opted out, but Iowa came out and did Iowa things in this game in terms of competing down the stretch. But see, Coach Drew, we were told that the Big Ten is not as competitive at the middle and lower level of the conference. And who said that? Diego Pavia said that also. So it was pretty awesome to see Pavia take it on the chin. He got absolutely smoked by an Illinois linebacker on a sack. He got smoked a few times. Respect to Pavia for his on-the-field play, but the way he acted after he didn't win the Heisman was pretty embarrassing. Had some disparaging gestures for the Hoosiers and Fernando Mendoza. Pretty gratifying to see a Big Ten team beat Pavia's team after all that shit he was talking. I mean, Pavia was a great player, a great competitor, but he's not a guy that you would want your son to emulate or any player on your team to emulate. He's a player who's good that you might tolerate as a coach because you need him to help you win a game. But he's like, if that's your senior captain and you're coaching high school football, you're like, well, we're in for a roller coaster ride because his attitude and his behavior is questionable.
Absolutely. What happened at the Cheez-It Bowl?
Michigan lost 27-41 to Texas, the Cheez-It Bowl. Not the most illustrious bowl games, although this game was competitive and interesting from like a scouting standpoint. Texas had a lot of opt-outs, Coach Drew, as you're aware. I know your sister lives in the Austin area and you follow the Longhorns. They played with probably their fourth running back on the depth chart who was respectable, and Arch Manning helped them pull it out. Michigan, new incoming coaching staff under Kyle Whittingham, who we think is going to do well at Michigan. I'm excited to see how that plays out. But Drew, you told me that some of the Michigan coaches who are not being retained on the staff, they did not wear Block M Michigan logos on their uniforms during the game. So they didn't really set Bryce Underwood and the Wolverines up for success if they're coming in with that kind of attitude, because Texas has top-notch talent on the defensive side of the ball, even with all the opt-outs they had. So I felt like Michigan players competed well. And as of this recording, we're still looking at transfer portal stuff. So we don't know how many players Michigan's going to lose, but a lot of Michigan players played in this game who we were afraid would transfer. So I kind of think this is maybe, I hate to say it, what's the term? It's a moral victory that that Michigan's players competed in this game, but I don't think they had a game plan to win
A
against
moral
Texas.
victory.
I know, I
See what
shouldn't
you
have
did
said
there.
it. I'm sorry.
Well, I mean, unmoral. Their coaches didn't even support Michigan as they know their way out. I mean, they didn't wear Block M's. There was a lot of questions about the gear that they chose. They don't care. They collected their paycheck. They're out. I think, again, now I don't want to run into a lot of Michigan hate, but I do want to say this. I like how all these things have happened recently, and then Michigan's like, we're going to investigate it ourselves.
How's that worked out in the past?
And then the
Not very
coaches all
well.
were like, yeah, we're done. I think they knew for a long time. I think one of my favorite Sherrill Moore quotes that's not really a quote about him, but his actions is, I don't think I've ever seen a coach that's been more play conservative calls live his life so sporadic. And I think that's kind of crazy. You would think
Reckless.
the way he would call the football would be like triple flea flickers and all this stuff, the way he was running his life. But he was so busy off the field where he could only be conservative on the field. That is just a crazy take. I thought that was hilarious.
Yeah, it was accurate. And the thing about Moore is, I mean, he was an offensive lineman, so you tend to think of, or I do, I tend to think of offensive linemen that become coaches as being maybe more conservative play callers, but also just, more disciplined and more chaste in their behavior. But I don't know. I'm about to say something that's going to get me in trouble. You've got secretaries in your office that are Instagram models. I don't know that is what you want in your athletic department, but I guess that's a career to pursue. But it was obvious they were caught having a negative interaction on the field early in the season that was on national television. Now, yeah, let's just move on to something else. I don't know.
Well, Utah beat Nebraska, as Nebraska has a few opt-outs. Matt Rule couldn't beat Utah. Utah's coach is going to Michigan. That one had some interesting takes on there as well.
The opt-outs, Emmett Johnson, my favorite Cornhusker this season, opting out really put Nebraska at a disadvantage. They did come out and compete in the game, but they didn't have the offensive firepower after Raiola hit the portal, and then not having Emmett Johnson. He was the backbone of that offense for the last half of the year, especially after Raiola got hurt. I understand why Johnson opted out, because he's got a bright NFL future. I'm not saying anything negative about him, but TJ Lateef, I believe, the quarterback, the freshman that started, he did some good things down the stretch, but he wasn't going to be able to carry this team without Johnson involved in the offense.
Absolutely. And then we also did have USC and TCU. That one went to overtime, and, well, something that's been dramatic all season with USC is they just can't tackle, and they couldn't find a way to tackle with 5 guys at the end of this game. USC let down the Big Ten just like they did the Pac-12.
Little Notre Dame on USC 8. It's not the first time, and it won't be the last time here on the Midwest Blitz. I agree. USC was crippled by a ton of opt-outs, transfer portals, guys going to the NFL, all Big Ten guys. But yeah, tackling, Coach Drew, as the Indiana Hoosiers have proven, we always say tackling is a mentality. If I want to get you on the ground, I'm going to get you on the ground. Obviously, sometimes you get a defensive back who's giving up 50 pounds on a running back or a tight end or something, and you miss a tackle. But USC has not been a good tackling team all season, like we said. It was interesting. I think that Jaden Maiava is a terrific quarterback. So this is not a shot at him, but it was interesting to see him trying to run this same offense with different receivers. There were a couple fade balls he threw where during the season, you're throwing a fade ball, you're throwing it to a spot and expecting a receiver to go and get it. But without the same receivers, the timing's off and the skill level, the receivers is different. And that was tough for Maiava. I did appreciate that he at least competed for the Trojans. But yeah, TCU was more prepared in this game for a number of reasons. Bad tackling by USC. But TCU won this game, Coach Drew, with a backup quarterback, former starter at Vanderbilt, who his dream school was TCU his whole life. He was from Texas, I believe. He transferred back there to be a backup to Josh Hoover. Josh Hoover hit the transfer portal, might be going to Indiana from what I'm hearing. That's not finalized. But Hoover hits the transfer portal. So you get this kid that comes in and he gets a dream victory. This is another, could be like the ending to some like Disney movie about football, honestly. So that was a pretty cool story. His family was there. That's my bright spot on that game, Coach Drew.
And that wraps up mostly all the bowl games now that we have to cover. Now we're just into the Final Four, and so it has been said.
Let's
Big
touch
Ten
on
teams.
Army and Navy both got bowl game victories over the last week. The running back, God's Power, I can't pronounce his last name, for Army, had 12 carries for 171 yards against UConn. Jim Mora Jr. did take a different job. He was the UConn head coach who had done a good job there for the last few years. But Army gets a win. Quarterback Cale Helms for Army was 7 of 8 for 100. We always like to see service academies have success. Maybe the better service academy story, though, was Navy achieving 11 wins in their bowl game against Cincinnati. Alex Teska, the fullback, and Eli Heidenreich, the wingback / wide receiver for the midshipmen. Coach Drew, they've played sports together since Little League, and this is their last time as seniors playing together. They went to Navy together, took the commitment to go to the academy and to join the Navy and play football together for 4 years. And pretty fun story there about two guys that played Little League and then get to win their last college game together. 11 wins for the midshipmen, huge for a service academy against a Cincinnati team whose quarterback did hit the portal. Sorsby, former Indiana Hoosier Brendan Sorsby, is in the portal. I think he's like the top portal quarterback according to some analysts, and had a great year. So Cincinnati a little shorthanded, but it is interesting to me to see these service academy kids where playing football is a treat for them. Just like as a high school kid, playing the games was a treat for us. And amongst this era of talking about how much kids are getting paid NIL money and all this stuff, to see the service academy kids go out there and play for the love of their school and the love of their country and get a win, I think it shows you something, Coach Drew, about attitude, the power of attitude and effort in life. And if you're Drew's a coach, I used to be a coach, I'm a ref and an umpire now, but these things do matter. And there's too often that we see kids that have opportunities to like play travel baseball or play varsity football or do different things, and they take these opportunities for granted. And so they don't get the most out of their potential. These kids at the service academy really came out and played their ass off, so they deserve a lot of credit for that. It's a good example for young people to see. Another reason why bowl games are fun and why we love bowl games here on the Midwest Blitz. Can I say something about the Rose Bowl again?
Yeah, absolutely.
The stories that I heard from some other football analysts who were at the Rose Bowl was about the gratitude that Indiana fans had for the opportunity to get back to the Rose Bowl for the first time since 1968. Living in Indianapolis, actually met a guy at the gym the other day who went to the Rose Bowl in 1968, an older gentleman, and he remembered going to that game, and he was going to the game this weekend. I'll bump into him again, but IU fans appreciative of the opportunity to be there, while Alabama fans have had maybe too much success to appreciate it, and they didn't travel as well as maybe you would have thought they would have because the Rose Bowl didn't mean as much to them. And I understand that if your team wins every year, it's not as big of a deal. IU play-by-play announcer Don Fisher has been at Indiana for over 50 years and got to see the Hoosiers win a Rose Bowl. He wasn't there in 1968. Obviously, you do math. That was more than 50, 51, 52 years ago. But hearing Fisher on national TV when they were playing highlights, Don Fisher, who I've met and is a pretty cool dude and is about as good of a play-by-play guy as you could be, he's enjoying this IU run as much as anybody. And it's fun to see that he suffered through all those years of, rough IU football, but he is so happy and enjoying his life right now. All the years that he's put in with the team, and he gets this reward to see them go on this run. We'll see where it ends, but Don Fisher being a part of this is great. I was wondering a few years ago, because I've listened to him my whole life, I wondered if he might retire, and he's still there. So I was happy to see Don Fisher be a part of this Rose Bowl win for Indiana. And also, let's talk about Pat Coogan again for a second, the Notre Dame transfer who helped the Irish get the national championship game last year. They opted to let him go and give the starting job to a younger player who they perceived to have more talent. Well, one man's trash is another man's treasure. And Pat Coogan has been a monster part of this Indiana operation. Obviously, he was Offensive Rose Bowl MVP. Another story about sticking with it and doing your best and seeing the results that can come from that. Pat Coogan's the ultimate example. So I guess I'll leave it on that, Coach Drew. Pat Coogan and Don Fisher being at the Rose Bowl with Indiana shows you that you don't have to be a front runner. You don't have to be preseason number one. You don't have to be a 5-star recruit. You don't have to be the tallest, the biggest, the strongest, the fastest. You can achieve dreams and have great moments, through perseverance. And I think through bowl season, especially with these teams left in the college football playoffs, it's a beautiful story. We go back to the 4-team playoff before, where you could almost tell 10 weeks into the year that you were going to get Alabama, LSU, Clemson, and Ohio State, or there was, a regular cast of characters. In this new era of college football, Coach Drew, the game has changed dramatically, where you do have a chance to win and succeed when the rules and all that stuff, it's just more fair now, top to bottom. And so this has been interesting and has made it a more competitive playing field. And I think that's what sports are about, is being able to observe teams, players, coaches, other people around programs, school presidents, athletic directors out there. I mean, I interact with a lot of athletic directors at the high school level and some at the college level, sometimes in baseball. And you can tell some of them really care about their student athletes, and some of them really care about having a good experience and making things competitive. And some people just go through the motions. And I've seen all of that from the time I was a kid to now being an adult. And I think that we're seeing now in college football that you're able to invest and achieve at levels. Even Vanderbilt, we dogged on Pavi a little bit earlier for having a bad attitude. Vanderbilt and their coach, Clark Lee, and alumni coming back there. This has been beautiful throughout the college football postseason to see all these stories evolve. And nothing against Georgia and Kirby Smart, but they're always a front runner. They got upset. So I don't know. It's been fun and interesting to see all these stories unfold. I guess I'll leave it there.
Yeah, absolutely. And the North Texas quarterback just committed to Oklahoma State.
Yeah.
Massmaker did commit there. I just wanted to update everybody in the Midwest goodbye. I don't got much to say, Nick. Is that it? Are we ready to go to the Final Four?
Hey, we're ready for the Final Four, the football Final Four, Coach Drew. They need to come up with better names, right? The quarterfinal,
semifinal.
I guess they can't use Final Four. It's probably trademarked, but this tournament has had ups and downs for sure from the selection process the last few weeks. Thank you guys for watching. I hope you've had almost as much fun as I have and Coach Drew has doing this. We put a lot of time in, and it's because we love interacting with the fans and sharing these stories. Really, that's what makes it fun.
Yep, absolutely. Coach Drew signing off.
See you guys.